Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Tonight's subject is serialization. Graham, what do you mean by that? I've been reading more comics, as one does, and I'm getting to a point with these where some of them they're kind of fizzling out. They're out kind of wandering into traffic, we'll say. Books that started out with a very strong premiere issue, had a couple of good follow-up issues, and then over subsequent months, they've lost the plot, lost the focus. Um, I think this is something that serialized entertainment is very subject to. We see this happen with TV shows that have very long runs. They've got some ideas of where they want to go, but they've got a 22 episode order, and they say, well, we've got 10 or 12 episodes that we need to tell the story, and the rest of them can just be one offs or fillers. And in general, that's fine, but the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. I've been following along with the Talkville podcast, that's the Smallville Rewatch podcast, for almost 3 years now, and this is definitely something that show dealt with. They got to the point where they had to fill episode orders, and they would generally say, like, okay, like, well, here's this one weird one, we'll hand it off to a guest director, and a couple of people in the writing room will handle the script, and we'll just shoot it and go. This happened in the 90s with the Gargoyles cartoon. The guys who created that one had an idea for a 10 episode show, and that was it. And it became so popular, obviously Disney wanted more, so they come back to them and they're like, hey, could you give us more? They're like, yeah, we've got an idea for probably 6 more episodes. They're like, no, we want 52 episodes. At that point, you get the writer's room together and you say, do you have an idea for an episode? Congrats, it just got greenlit. And all kinds of just weird crap starts happening. Your narrative and your continuity all get shot to hell in the name of forced production. There's a similar effect at a smaller scale happening with some of the comics that I'm reading. If you've watched over the last couple of months, you know how critical I was of Absolute Batman issue 4 because they brought in a guest artist to handle that one. And after other videos that I've watched and learning more about how comic production works, the impression that I get is that the main artist, Nick Dragotta, probably fell behind and wasn't able to keep up with the production schedule for whatever reason. And so they needed to call in a relief hitter to just get something out, because that 4th issue, the story had nothing to do with the main story, and the art was extremely subpar. That's frustrating for me as a reader, because Absolute Batman is a monthly book that costs $5. And you can't tell me that the art from that guest illustrator was worth the same $5 as the art from Nick Dragotta, because it just wasn't. But they charged the same. I'm frustrated by that. The last 2 issues of Absolute Batman, 7 and 8, they're kind of like a two-parter sort of one-off story. Like the first 6 issues were one volume, and then 7 and 8 were part of another story. He fights the Absolute version of Mr. Freeze. There was a cool seed of an idea there, and the execution kind of overlapped with another story. There were 2 stories going parallel. It was like him fighting Mr. Freeze while also reflecting on the life of a friend who was some kind of like plays with fire type villain. It was weird. They were trying to do a juxtaposition that I don't think worked all that well. The original idea for Mr. Freeze was cool. He finds some kind of ice age bacteria that gives him powers, and then he uses it to freeze people. Like, okay, like there was something there. They didn't really have anything meaningful developed from it, and now the series is kind of wandering into traffic. These 2 issues weren't illustrated by Nick Dragotta. The artist on 7 and 8 was better than the artist on 4, but it still was nowhere near as good as Nick Dragotta. I find that disappointing. It costs the same for something that's not as good. And at that point, I would rather wait an extra month, give Dragotta 2 months to finish a really good issue, versus calling in somebody else who's, again, like this phenomenon where they're just not as good as I am at drawing. And I know every artist feels that way, and I can be honest about what my limitations are with art. You go look at the stuff from Engines of Liberty, and it's nowhere near as good as what I can do now. But that's just a matter of me putting into work over the last 10 years. And I'm still not where I would like to be. Geez, I was looking at some Frank Frazetta art on X today, and I was like, yeah, that's a guy who did it professionally because he was able to put in the time every day, and he just got great over effort and repetition. Anyway, I'm wandering into the weeds. Graham, what are you talking about? I guess in general, the problem with serialization is that you can start with a very strong idea, and then if sales are strong, you kind of want to keep putting out monthly issues. But the ideas are harder to come by, and you're not always going to have them. You can continue to put pencil to paper and write something and draw something, but without that idea underneath to support it, it'll eventually lose its strength. Transformers started to lose its focus. I think I just read issue 20, and it's definitely back on track now that Megatron has entered the storyline. The G.I. Joe books have been a similar treatment. The Duke book was the best, the Cobra book was good, the Destro book was fine, the Scarlet book was bad. And now that they're into a main G.I. Joe series, it's acceptable. G.I. Joe issue 6 had a really cool showdown between Duke and Cobra Commander at the end, but I don't feel about that book the way that I felt about the Duke book. And I wish I did, because I had a great time with the Duke book. But it's serialized, it's got an audience now, and that means some reliable level of income and stability for the publisher, but the returns on that are going to diminish unless they really are able to generate solid ideas and just execute on them. As I think about this phenomenon with serialization and ongoing books versus event books like Superman Red Sun that I just read, that book had a much stronger impact because knowing that it was an event book, knowing that the ending was built in, meant that they didn't have to drag it out. They were able to write the beginning, the middle, and the end and hit you with all of it and then go on to the next thing. With serialization, that's not really possible. You got to keep people coming back month after month. With TV shows, it's the same thing. You got to keep them coming back. I've talked about shows that were a victim of their own success. Obviously, there was Gargoyles. I think the same thing was true of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Those 3 original seasons were very tightly plotted and conceived and executed, and they did a fantastic job with it. People loved it so much that the fan demand eventually led to the follow-up series, The Legend of Korra. I liked season 1 of Legend of Korra, but the same thing happened. People loved it so much that the studio demanded more, and the artists were just kind of forced to flog themselves into producing something and putting it on screen, and the returns diminished. It was serialized, it was not as good. They had a couple of cool ideas that they came to along the way, but it was nowhere near as satisfying as the original series or as season 1 of the show. So all in all, this is to say that while serialization can bring you some enjoyment, and I do still like going to the comic book shop every Wednesday, there are a couple of books that are on my pull list, well, that I've removed at this point, just because I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth like I did at the beginning. It helps that my library has these on like digital loan, so like cool, because some of these series are tied together: Void Rivals, G.I. Joe, Transformers. And there's going to be an overlapping story at some point. I can keep up with that digitally without having to spend $20 a month on books that I'm not enjoying and don't really care to collect so much. That's fine. But there's this hazard here. I think if there was a way for comic book writers and publishers to just be a little bit more bold and to stick the landing with the endings and maybe greenlight something else along the way, then sure, but maybe that's not built into the method. I don't know. It's a struggle. I've had series ideas for stuff that I wanted to write, but I've read so many great endings to great series over the years that I really want to stick the landing when I tackle a series myself. And to the point where I'll limit myself and say, okay, like if I do this series, it could only be 5 books or 6 books. I wouldn't want to try to write 12 books and lose myself along the way and just have a filler installment here and there. Like, I'd rather have 5 really strong and great installments of something than 12 where 6 of them are mediocre. I'd rather have my hair blown back. Graham, you're bald. Yes, I'm aware of this. Bald by choice. I shave. Anyway, all of this is a wandering way of saying that stories with a stronger direction and a stronger ending are preferable over just getting something month over month. Even Geiger, even the most recent issue of Geiger, I got to the end and I'm like, I'm not really clear on what the motivation of this villain is. And she has a face off with Geiger at the end, and it's like, that feels rushed. That idea needed to be developed a little bit more. We'll see how it carries on into the next one. Jeff Johns is a really good writer. Maybe there'll be a point to it later, but I felt like that particular installment could have been better. I would like to have kind of that same feeling that I had early on with these books. Anyway, that's me wandering and saying that serialization has its limits and its hazards, and I hope that there are better turns for some of these series that I'm following down the road. Anyway, drive safe. See you out there.